Good afternoon and good morning for those on the East Coast. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. It's Tim Lee here, and I'm going to be presenting on Google Apps Admin Toolbelt. So I'll be presenting here just in a couple of minutes. We're going to wait 1 or 2 minutes for more people to join us. There is a link, a goo.gl link on the slide deck, and hopefully you can see that in front of you. Just remember it is case sensitive, so that's a uppercase F and uppercase C at the end. So if you do want to jump onto the slide deck to walk through yourself, I'll be screen sharing, but feel free to do that for yourself. And I'll be starting in about 2 minutes. So again, thanks for those that joined this Google Apps Admin Toolbelt session. We'll be starting in about 1 minute, and we'll be kicking it off in just about a minute. And thanks for joining the EDU on Air series. And if you do want to go and put things on Twitter, it's using the hashtag Google EDU on Air. But also on the slide deck in front of me, I do have that goo.gl. If you do want to jump onto that slide deck, you're more than welcome, but I will be screen sharing the slide deck as we kind of talk through today. We've got about half an hour to talk and talk about the admin toolbelt. So as a little introduction, my name is Tim Lee. I'm the CTO for Amplified IT, and I'm going to be guiding you guys through this session. I am going to screen share and obviously go and pull on my slide deck here. So I will be starting in about 10 seconds or so. So I will be coming in at the end and talking about those Q&A questions. Feel free to post those throughout the session. And I will be coming in and starting to talk to you guys at the end of the session, but feel free to, at any point, putting those questions in. Any of those that the time doesn't allow us to answer, I'll definitely be answering those right at the end, and I'll also put in the answers straight onto the link that will be sent out. So let's get started and let's move on. So I'm going to screen share here, and I'm going to screen share my Google Hangouts, and then I'm going to jump over to the slide deck. Now, there is a goo.gl. And this goo.gl link will take you to the slide deck that I'm going to be talking through today. Just remember, it is case sensitive, and that is a capital F and a capital C at the end. So let's get started. So as a little bit of an introduction to myself, my name is obviously Tim Lee, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Amplified IT. We're a group of Google Apps consultants that work with schools to kind of give them a roadmap, give an understanding and a plan for where they're going to be moving with Google Apps, with Chromebooks, and with also just moving their whole school into the cloud. I've been working with Google for a number of years and moved obviously over from the UK, as you can tell from my accent, albeit that I currently live in Virginia. My accent is originally from the UK. I'm a Google certified or authorized Google education trainer, certified administrator, and certified deployment specialist. But my background is more in infrastructure redesign. And so that's why it was key, maybe, for me to kind of talk about admin toolbelt. And so as we kind of go forward here in this presentation, I'm going to first talk about some tools that Google provides us and that Google provides us to have and manage Google Apps in general. So the first tool that I'm going to talk about and go into a little bit is the Google Apps migration for Microsoft Exchange. Now, this is how, and it might be a tool that many of you have looked at, and it's how we'd actually move away from Exchange or migrate data up into Google. And so if we're going to be migrating our mail and maybe archives or also a calendar or contact data, this is the perfect tool for doing that. And essentially what we can do is actually install it on servers. And we might have multiple workstations that we might install it on, and this will help us migrate our data. Now, there's a couple of things you might want to think about when we're actually using this GAMI tool, is that there are some limitations. Things like speed. We can run 1 message per second per user. and we can only run about 25 concurrently. So making sure you've got a plan for that and making sure that you've got those all lined up. We can also run multiple servers in tandem. Now, a lot of people think that this is only for Exchange, but it also allows us to migrate data from PST files and also from Google Apps to Google Apps or IMAP to Google Apps. Now, there are some other third-party tools I'll talk about migration, but certainly one that if you're looking to move your mail and contacts or move over to start using Gmail, it's definitely a tool that you'll come across. Now, if we are a Microsoft environment and we have used Active Directory in the past, we might actually want to sync all the users that we've got from our Active Directory up into Google. And this turns into like a zero-touch management for us. So we might use this Google Apps Directory Sync tool. Now, I know a lot of schools out there are using it. The key thing to think about this is if you are deploying this Google Apps Directory Sync tool, it gets installed on a server locally within your environment. And it's a one-way sync. It syncs the data from your Active Directory or user accounts from your Active Directory or organization units up into Google. It will also synchronize groups, user profiles, shared contacts, or even calendar resources. The only gotcha that are put on here or a kind of a lessons learned from when we've been working with schools is making sure that you don't just try and recreate the same kind of structure up into Google. So what we might want to do is we might want to go and look at what is a structure that we're wanting in Google Apps. How's that OU structure going to be? And Peter Henry from Amplified IT at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time is going to be presenting on Google Apps Admin Console best practices and talking through some of those OU structures and why we might want OU structures set up in certain ways. But don't just try and recreate what you've got in Active Directory, because in Active Directory, we actually manage permissions via security groups and also obviously OUs as well. But in Google, it's mostly through or all through the different organization units. So when you're looking at doing this, we should be using GADS, the Google Apps Directory Sync tool, as a translator. So rather than having a breakout of school, then staff and students, we can translate accounts into a new organization structure. And I always recommend that what we might want to do is write down what we have in Active Directory, write down what we want in Google Apps, and then for the search rules and the actual setup of GADS, we should be working out how can we get one group of staff over to a different OU over in Google Apps. And it's quite simple to do. But also we might want to get this running every day at a certain time, or maybe multiple times a day. And for those that are planning on doing this, what we do is we go all the way through and we set this up. And underneath the sync tab, there's two buttons there. There's the blue pill and the red pill. Always take the blue pill before the red pill, because essentially that blue pill will simulate the sync. So I definitely recommend that you consider with the Google Apps Directory Sync tool, that you consider syncing it or at least simulating it first. Again, one of the key points to make is that this is a one-way synchronization. You're not affecting your Active Directory accounts whatsoever. And also, we can choose which attributes that we want to use for our sync. So we don't have to use the email field. We can use any field that you want to set up. And we can get as complicated and as organized as you want. So there's no need to clean up Active Directory to go and install this tool. And as you get more involved and more advanced with your Google Apps setup, what we might want to do is we might want to tweak that GADS rules or tweak that GADS sync to then give us more out of these syncing. Now, I guess the point to maybe make there is that schools might start off with just creating accounts. They might create some groups, but then they can also go to user profiles and maybe sync in details like which school a student's in or what grade they're in. So when I hover over their name within Google Apps, I actually see that data. So let's jump on to another tool here called Google Apps Password Sync. And again, if we are doing GADS and we're syncing the accounts and using GADS to manage the accounts in Google Apps, then this Google Apps Password Sync is definitely something to consider. What we need to do is we need to install it on each domain controller. And what we need to do as well is that we need to tie this back. If we've installed on every domain controller, all this is doing is picking up that change, the password change, and syncing it over to Google. So the thing that a lot of schools don't really understand when they're starting this is that all passwords need to be synced once before they'll actually be in sync. Because all that GAPS is doing is not syncing the data that's in Active Directory, but syncing the data changes. So that password change, it syncs up to Google Apps. So firing through here and looking at another tool, and this is a tool that Google's provided this last school year. And it's one that many schools don't even know exists. That Google Apps School Directory Sync is certainly one that I'd recommend you considering, because what this can do is this can actually tie up straight to your SIS. So whether you're PowerSchool, whether you're using Skyward or others, this tool can take exports from those SISs and create users, create groups, create organization units based off that those CSV files. Now, I've used it in many different times, but we've found that it's more useful for groups, and it can be used in tandem with GADs. So you can just use it to create Google Groups, which are really powerful for staff and students to use. So staff members could have a Google Group populated with every single student that's in their class that they teach, and can use that for Google Play for EDU, for sharing documents or anything else. So going forward here and just looking at some of the other pieces that are in place in Google's tools, this is another tool that Google's provided. And again, remember, all of these are for free. This used to be a paid tool. Google Vault used to cost $10 per staff member per year, and it was free for students. But recently this year, they've now turned it on for all schools and is completely and utterly free. It's a requirement in most districts or most states to have some kind of e-discovery, and Google Vault is a perfect tool to do that. So what this will do is this will actually pick up any mail that's been sent to and from your accounts, and also look at Drive data as well, and we can search through those for discovery purposes. Google Vault, to get there, we go to ediscovery.google.com as the direct address, but you can also get there through your admin console. A couple things just to think about if you are thinking about using Google Vault is that, is it really an IT member's job to actually manage this? Maybe because it's going to be so easy using this Google Vault, we might want to delegate this to other areas within our school, whether that's the HR department or other departments within the school itself. The other thing is, is that we need to set a retention period, because what we want to do is tell Vault how long, and each of you will have within your school or your state or your organization, you'll have a data compliance rule. You'll have some rules saying we need to keep data for 7 years, 3 years. Now, if you do set this in Google Vault, please note, it will actually go and say, hey, if we set it to keep our data for 365 days, once that goes up to 366, that data will be deleted. Anything that's older than a year will be deleted, not only from Vault, but then also from the Gmail inbox as well. So make sure that you are planning and looking at Vault and seeing how you can use it. Even if you've not used it to date, and touch wood, you don't need to do many legal discovery jobs, but I definitely recommend doing a trial or a mock discovery just to get to know how to use it. Because one thing is, it does show us just the footprints that somebody's taken in the sand or in the snow, but it won't help us guide them. So what it will do is it'll show me what somebody has said, and I can search mail or search Hangout messages or Drive documents, but it won't allow me to change or monitor or change or also modify those documents. Another tool from Google that a lot of schools don't know about is one called toolbox.googleapps.com. It's a Google Apps toolbox. When you call Google support, and Google support overall is free, they've got some great break fix support available. So you call up Google, they'll actually guide you through a lot of things, but you get asked things like, hey, what is my current browser? What browser are you using? Give me statistics about the browser. And I'm actually just going to go to this very quickly here. Is if I go to toolbox.google.com, what I can do is I can click on the browser information. This will tell me all the details about my browser, and also do a firewall check of all different Google services. Now, the other thing as well is it does have this tool called Log Analyzer. So I can actually use the Log Analyzer tools. And what I can do is I can look at different logs. So if you're using GADs, GAPs, or other tools, or even if you're using Chromebooks, if you go and copy the Chrome OS device log, paste it into here, and analyze. That will give you some information about what's going on during that process. If you're using GAMI, which is the migration tool, the Google Apps migration for Microsoft Exchange, again, reviewing those logs, you can paste them in here and actually analyze them. So going back to the slide deck here, it's certainly something that a lot of schools don't have in their tool belt, or they don't actually realize that Google actually provides this whole platform for us. And it's got some other good links off that, or also other good tools that you can actually go and look at. Now, any school going out and using Google Apps or planning Google Apps knows that it's not going to only be able to use just the tools that Google provides. Google's actually created a whole ecosystem around Google Apps for Education and also Google Apps for Business. There's a lot of third-party tools that we might want to look at, but I'm kind of keen to focus on particularly those free ones that are available. So this is one that a lot of schools have started using. Andrew Stillman over at New Visions, and again, big, huge shout out to him, created this add-on for Google Spreadsheets. And what this allows us to do is look at all the details about our Chromebooks in a Google spreadsheet. Now, if you're currently manually enrolling your Chromebooks and then moving them to different OUs, think again. This will save you a lot of time. If you do want, there's a link at the bottom of the page which will give you a guide or a walkthrough of how to use this tool. If I had, I could do a whole half an hour on this tool itself. But the key thing is, if you are looking at managing Chromebooks, this is definitely worthwhile. Because what we can do is we can download all the data about our Chromebooks and then modify things like notes or annotated location or even asset IDs and be able to upload those back into our directory so we can make bulk or mass changes. The other thing that I like about this tool is it's not only about setting up the Chromebooks or putting them in the right OUs. We can also query details of who was the last person on this Chromebook. Or also, one of the options in here is it actually shows us the last sync date of Chromebooks. So we could actually go and look at when the last time Chromebook was switched on, and then be able to identify maybe out of our 10,000 Chromebooks, what ones are not being used and where. And then maybe go and set that up or set up a process that we go and speak and reach out to those teachers, reach out to that school to help them and find out what the hurdles are for them actually utilizing these devices. It's not just to tell them off, but actually allowing and removing the hurdles that they might have. So it's definitely a worthwhile tool, and it's worthwhile maybe spending the 7 minutes, I think it is, for that video to look through what that possibly can do. So here's another tool that's come out and been out for quite some time. Now, if you want to control Google Apps, you can use the Admin Console. And Pete's doing, as I mentioned, Peter Henry's doing a session on Admin Console best practices at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. But it's sometimes tedious to go through and do bulk edits. It's also sometimes painful to get the information that you want out of the admin console. And that's not because it's not set up correctly, but maybe some of the things that we're wanting to do for schools is very different than the average use case. And Google's added a huge amount to that admin console over the last couple of years. It's been fantastic to see that grow. And they certainly do get feedback and then also implement features. One of the things just to point out before we talk about GAM is that within the admin console, at the bottom of every page, there's a feedback button. Recommend that you use that. You can also tell straight up to the project engineers and product managers, you can give them feedback of what should happen on that page, and that will help them improve, and they do look at that information. But GAM is all about using Google APIs. Now, if I said to APIs to many of you, it'll go straight over your head, and understandably so. But what a guy called Jay Lee, no relation, but he used to live about an hour and a half away from where I do in Virginia. Jay Lee created Google Apps Manager, and I believe now Jay's actually working at Google, so a big shout out for what he's done here. But he created a command line tool to help us use APIs. This is something we need to install either on a Mac or a Windows machine or a Linux machine, and it allows us to do things in bulk. It also allows us to do things that maybe we can't get through the admin console, but we can get through using APIs. Whether that's resetting, passwords on bulk, or whether that is taking a CSV file and uploading it and moving students into the relevant OU if we need to do this manually and we don't have one of these syncs in place. Another thing that a lot of schools are going through and using GAM for is uploading photographs, whether that's staff photographs, or a lot of schools might, if we look at a use case, might run into an issue that they've got 20,000 students in the directory. And obviously, when picking a staff name, I might mistakenly pick a student's username instead and share a document inappropriately. So you'll notice that when you go into the admin console or whenever you're sharing, even in your Gmail, even if you're sending an email, you'll see a little icon that comes up next to a student or a staff member when you type in their name. There might be a student called Tim Lee and a staff member called Tim Lee. But what we can do is upload a standard icon for all students. Now, there's no way to lock down this and not allow a student to change it. But what we can do is run this GAM on a daily basis. So then it's always changing back to that S icon or the student's icon. So another thing, whether that's creating filters, labels for users, we can also do group management. This is an area when we do our GAFE audits, we found that a lot of groups don't have the right settings. When they've turned on Google Groups for Business, which allows us granular controls of groups, they didn't have the right setup or the right permissions on groups. And what this was that they're actually creating the groups, but then anyone on the domain can join and send details to that group. And some of them were administrative groups where students could join and see all the content inside them. So what GAM allows us to do is download that all into a spreadsheet and then change things and then upload it again. Another basic use case that I've got written down in front of me here is that syncing groups or creation of groups based on OU membership. So if I've already got my students laid out in different OUs, I can sync the groups based off those OU memberships. So therefore, if I've got my grade ones, I could automatically just sync based on OUs and create groups based off that. Now, when we're going schools are now going into the realm of customizing scripts. Now, I know that James Peterson from Amplified IT was actually doing a whole session on scripts and add-ons earlier today. But this is an area that's growing, and I think that's going to go and blossom in the next couple of years. And this is the fact of we've now got a common platform across many of our schools, right? And essentially what we can do is create custom scripts to help us use this common platform. So there's a lot of scripts and add-ons being created. I just mentioned Chromebook inventory, but another one, if teachers being able to go and reset students' password from an add-on, or to customize workflow for documents that they go, or I create a form and then there's an approval process that gets put in place and certain emails get flown around between different users in our environment, or also being able to collect gradebook information. Schools with Chromebooks are now creating custom apps and extensions, and James does that for us and works in that team here at Amplified IT. But one of the things is, whether that is simply just some customized apps for schools, or it might take another viewpoint to solve an issue that we have. I can tell you that most of you, whichever school you're in, whatever size of district, probably run into the issue that you have Windows environments and you've got Chrome on that Windows environment, and that people are not signing into Chrome. So all the management that you're doing, pushing down apps and extensions, do not appear on that person's Chrome. And it's simply because they're not signing in. So what we did was we came up with an extension to force the sign-in of Chrome. Therefore, anyone who's logging onto that or going into that machine, opens up Chrome, it's going to force them to log into Chrome, or at least keep on taking them back to the login page to log into Chrome. Because then what they're doing is they're going to get the bookmarks, the settings, the apps, the extensions that we've customized for them. Some schools are starting to do an SIS, student lookup for administrators. So it's very, very easy for them to look up the information rather than having to go into PowerSchool or other things, having just a tie-in to that as well. Now, when you're going out into the market and when you're starting to look at third-party products, what I have done on this page is kind of given an idea of what are on the market and kind of broken this down into, GAFE security and compliance, and a shout out to CloudLock there that provides security around Drive and sites. Now, again, as you go through your roadmap, whether you're just deploying Google Apps or you've been there for a number of years, you're going to need some third-party tools to help you overcome some hurdles, or at least give you some guidance, some management of Drive, or some management of Google Sites, or whether you need to have backup and restore. Backupify, SysCloud do provide that. A lot of schools are moving out to a single sign-on solution. There are many out there. I could probably name about 5 to 10 off the top of my head, but here's a couple that maybe you should be looking at. Clear Login is certainly one that's started moving into the space. Web filtering of a new type of solution that's cloud-based, that ties around Chromebooks and Chrome logins, something like Securely and GoGuardian. Or also, you might be using GAMI and finding, hey, this isn't really working for me. I need another solution to migrate off Office 365 or other tools. Now, there are a number of products out there. Training, guidance of going through and using how to use the tools, or maybe applying the first step of PD, which is how do the tools work? So then I spend my focus on then how do I apply the tools? And then therefore that's what your ITRTs are spending their time doing. I've got a couple more here, but a lot of schools have got older devices, right? They've got older devices in their environment and PCs, and they want to turn them into Chromebooks or Chrome OS devices. Using Cloud Ready from Neverware does just that. Essentially, no matter where you are, and I guess going back to a point on your roadmap, we're all going on the same journey. You might be on different stages, but you're probably going to need some third-party tools and the right one. Because what you don't want to do is start down a journey and start providing one third-party tool and then switching to another. And again, these are important to help you get there and should support you as you're kind of going forward. And a lot of schools, I always spend a lot of time on the planning aspect because I find a lot of schools don't have that plan. And that's certainly something that I'm very keen to make sure that schools get that roadmap. What are we doing in the next 6 months? What are our objectives? How are we going to do this? And can one of these tools help us? And finishing up today, I'm going to go over to the Q&A, is just talking about our GAFE audit. We do this every day. We've got multiple GAFE audits ongoing at a time, but this is a remote audit of your domain. Google Apps for Education, we review what settings you've got and then give you a guide on what you should change and where and how. And it's kind of like a training or empowerment. I know that a couple of people that are on this webinar certainly have done this in the past, and our key focus on here is trying to identify what you should change now and where you can start kind of creating that roadmap to speed up your process and understanding or removing the hurdles as you kind of go through there. So finishing up today, my contact details are on here, but also that goo.gl at the bottom, for those of you who joined a little bit late here, will give you a link to that slide deck or the slide deck that I'm talking through today. So that's goo.gl/F, lowercase y, 8, lowercase n, 8, and uppercase C. So I'm going to be jumping onto Twitter straight after this to answer any questions as well, but let's just go and see and stop sharing this. And let's go and see if there's many questions. And I've got a few questions in here from a few people. So one of the questions is, how do you select the tool? How do I actually go and find the right tool for your school, and you've got a Chromebook rollout? What I would say is finding your objectives, making sure you're writing down your objectives of exactly what you're looking for before you go out to market. Because it's amazing, a lot of schools don't actually think about, what do I need? What do I have as I kind of move forward? But they go out to market and see, hey, this has got a phenomenal resource or a phenomenal thing that I hadn't even thought about, and start getting distracted by it. So focusing on exact your needs, or working out what your needs are, and then finding the right fit and making sure that you do have that in place. Now, another question on Vault. So I'm saying that if a Vault was set to 365 days retention, that on day 366, it will also delete mails and user inbox that are older than 365. Yes, you can change your, I think that came from Rick, you can change your policy to be indefinite or longer, 3 years, 7 years, or whatever. You can change that to whatever you want. So going back to that Vault, and this is the retention period in Vault, making sure you do set that whether it's indefinite or a certain time period, but also understand if you're just migrating your data into Google Apps, that data will be cleaned or deleted if it's over your retention period. So I've got a question as well here, just talking about the gaps tool. Yes, you'll need to, if you're going to go and set up a policy, your changes of passwords will be within Active Directory. And so you're going to be actually changing your passwords in Active Directory. And you're going to be focusing on changing passwords there. And you won't do, if you've got GADs and gaps running, then you won't actually be doing the user management within Google Apps through the admin console. But as I said, Pete's actually got a session starting just here at 1 o'clock, and he's going to be talking through the admin console best practices. If anyone's got any more questions, feel free to throw them on the question answering section, or also reach out. My details are in the slide deck, and have a great day. I'm actually here at a Tech Team Summit here in Minnesota today, so I've got further presentations, but I'll get back to you later on today. Enjoy ED On Air. Thanks.